what I will do is talk about two things today. One is to update you on our approach to the lobbying at the next phase on the data protection regulations in Brussels. So it may cover some of the territory that you've heard from Chris or from Rosemary, but it will be from the perspective of what we're doing as your representative organization to influence the outcome in a way that's sensible. And then I will talk to you about our code of practice that we launched back in September that articulates 5 principles of behavior that we think are fundamental to building trust with your customers today, and I think creates a foundation for being, as Chris said, in a situation where you don't need to panic, because if you follow the 5 principles and create the behaviors in your organization that they imply, you will really be in a reasonably good position, whatever the final details of the legislation. And I will be followed by Julia and Jonathan, who will show you how 2 companies have approached the challenge in the real world, 2 significant brands who I think have got it spot on. So as you've heard, 2/3 of the cake is baked. The commission version of the cake was a somewhat magical mystery tour that was published in January 2012. Somewhat more scarily, perhaps with a Halloween theme, the Parliament version was approved in March 2014. So you can see our little goblin theme. And as you've heard already, the council version is not quite yet baked. So what we have been doing is spending quite a lot of time with the Ministry of Justice team that negotiates on behalf of the UK and the DAPIX Working Party to ensure that the council version is as well balanced as it can be. And it has made some encouraging progress in the areas of being more risk-based, a little bit more flexible, a little bit more aware of the issues that business faces as it innovates in this information age, in this data-driven economy. There are some ways from being finished, although there are hopes still that under the Latvian presidency, by the end of June, a general agreement might be reached, but it is by no means certain. Chapter 3, which contains most of the issues that directly affect us, is going to start being worked on over the next few weeks, so they're going to pick up where the Irish presidency left off some time back. It then, as you've heard today, goes into trilogue, where the 3 versions get reconciled in a negotiation process. That takes place behind closed doors with a few representatives from the Data Protection Ministry of Justice team, from the Commission, a couple of rapporteurs, representatives of the Libe Committee, which is the Civil Affairs and Justice Committee of the Parliament, and a few representatives of the Council of Ministers. And what we have been doing is having pre-meetings with those key groups in order to understand what their approach will be to the negotiation and seeding in what we think might be a balanced outcome. So we met in January in Brussels with Bruno Gencarelli, who leads the data protection team at the Commission, and his associates Thomas Zerdik and Irina. And actually, we had quite a constructive discussion, and they believe that there will be flexibility from all 3 parties as they go through those negotiations, although each of the 3 have some bottom lines. But they think some of the positions that have been adopted in Parliament, and even with their own text, were designed to create some headroom for negotiation. In the same way, we met with Claude Moraes, who Christopher mentioned he's about to see a few weeks ago, and asked for the Parliament's approach to the negotiation. And again, he indicated that their negotiating teams will be quite flexible in terms of trying to reach consensus and agreement. So the mood seems to be that this has gone on for too long, that industry needs clarity, people need clarity, and we all need to get on with life, so that there will be a fair amount of give and take, we hope, to come up with a version. Now, in our discussions, we try to highlight the areas that we think are better, and what I'll do today, I don't want to get into too much detail, but it's just give you some indication of areas where the council text is better, but there are also some areas actually where the Parliament text is better for our industry and for business. And by approaching the conversation by saying there are things we like in each version, we think we have a better chance of achieving some consensus. So one thing, Chapter 1, Article 4, the Council version removes the word explicit in this particular statement. Or as Rosemary said earlier, the definition of consent in the Council version is unambiguously, which is an ambiguous word, actually, but we think allows a little bit more flexibility. But still, it needs to be clear, specific, and informed consent, even if it is unambiguous. I want to spend a little bit more time on the profiling issue because I think people in our industry are very concerned about the potential limitations on profiling. And I'm going to start with the Commission version, because when we met with Bruno Giancarelli and his team, they were very, very clear, and we used the Nectar and Tesco Club Card examples in our conversation. They were very, very clear in saying that they had no intention to limit the activities of our industry legitimately in producing things like targeting and offers and things like that. That they very specifically had a legal definition of profiling and were looking at automated activity that had a legal effect on the subject. So what we do if you're offering a discount on a carton of milk does not have a legal impact or effect on the customer. So what their text specifically says is the data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision evaluating personal aspects which is based solely on automated processing, including profiling, and produces legal effects concerning him. So there has to be a legal effect produced. So in the case of a mortgage loan, as was referenced earlier, that decision might be legally binding. And all they're saying, and what they said to us, is the decision needs at some point to have a human being look at the decision to confirm that it's the right decision, and that you can't go from an automated credit reference to an automated letter approving or denying the loan. Now, the Council version in this is even more clear in a sense, in that it says it includes the right to object only in respect of automated processing where there are severe legal effects. So that's a higher threshold, severe legal effects rather than legal effects. But I think where the concern does come in is the Parliament version, which is more open-ended and doesn't have the specific limitation of legal effects. But our optimistic way of looking at this is that if the Council and the Commission have a similar understanding of what's trying to be created, this may be one of the issues where the Parliament actually concedes during the negotiation. But I can't guarantee that, of course, in advance. We talked about the right to be forgotten. The Council version, again, is a little bit better. And again, the Council version takes more into account the difficulties that small businesses would have with administrative burdens and exempts them from some of the requirements. But what's also interesting to look at is a couple of areas where the Parliament text is better. And what we're trying to do with this is with the help of the Ministry of Justice, get similar text into the Council version when they work on Chapter 3, so that when it comes to negotiation, there's little disparity. And I think, again, Rosemary mentioned this, but the Parliament text includes this recital 39B on legitimate interest, which is quite helpful as a grounds for processing for our industry. And it says very specifically, the processing of personal data for the purpose of direct marketing for own or similar products and services, or for the purposes of postal direct marketing, should be presumed as carried out for the legitimate interest of the controller. And it goes on to say the same thing for B2B. So I think it would be very helpful if we're able to get similar or even better text into the Council version for when we get to negotiation. And in the whole issue of pseudonymous data, which is a category of data that's entered into the Parliament text and into the Council text, is data that cannot immediately be identified as associated with personal characteristics. So maybe, group data around website traffic and so on. is treated a little bit differently. And recital 58A in particular says profiling based solely on the processing of pseudonymous data should be presumed not to significantly affect the interests, rights, or freedoms of the data subject. And again, I think that's quite good for those of you that have a lot of web traffic analytics and ad serving and so on. But what I really wanted to talk about, so that's that. What I really wanted to talk about is the approach we're taking, and I think Chris said it very, very well. If you approach your customers in an open and transparent way, you should end up with a greater degree of brand loyalty and repeat purchase and more. And the way you treat privacy and personal data is becoming a more and more important differentiator between one brand and the other. And I often say, I'm often asked by marketers, what is the minimum threshold that I need to achieve in order to be compliant with the legislation? And I've always felt that's the wrong question for a marketer to ask. A marketer should be asking, how do I engage my customers in the way that will make them buy from me, be loyal to me, and stay loyal over time and buy more product from me over time? So if you ask and start from the question the marketer should ask and answer it in the right way, then your approach to data and privacy will put you in a very good place in relation to the legislation. And what we have created with our new code is a whole system or framework, if you will, that guides, hopefully, brands in how to create that trust with their customers. So at the top, it's based on 5 principles of behavior that we think are fundamental to this data-driven economy we live in. Under each principle, there's a few outcomes or behaviors that we think drive from that that are important. There are a few rules, and then the whole thing is supported by a new set of guides, 9 brand new best practice guides in detail by channel that have been published on the website, ranging from 50 to 100 pages long. And I'll just take you through the 5 principles, but I'm going to focus on the outcomes because I think that's probably more important. So the first principle is put your customer first. That's fundamental guidance for all marketers and what we were all taught. And what should happen if you do that is that customers receive a positive and transparent experience throughout their association with a company, that customers receive marketing information that is relevant to them, and customers receive prompt, efficient, and courteous service. That's a fundamental. If you do that, your customers will be happy, and the policymakers and the regulators will be happy. Respect privacy. Customers should have a clear understanding of the value exchanged when sharing personal information. Companies are upfront and clear about why they are collecting data and how they should intend to use it, and Julia and Jonathan will give you very good examples of how to do that. Companies are sensitive and avoid marketing that is intrusive or excessive, and companies do not target vulnerable consumers. I think you'll agree. If you do that, your customers will be happy. And if you do that, the policymakers and the regulators will be happy. Be honest and fair. Companies are clear, open, and transparent about all costs and processes. Companies must not mislead customers, and companies deliver what they promise. Again, I think you'll agree. If you do that, your customers will be happy to do business with you, and the policymakers and the regulators will be happy with how you conduct your business. Be diligent with data. Customers always know who is collecting their data, why it is being collected, and what it will be used for. All customer data is accurate and up to date, and companies will hold data securely. Again, I think you'll agree that's the minimum expectations that your customer should have of you as a company. And if you do that, the policymakers and the regulators will be happy with what you're doing. And finally, take responsibility. Companies have the resources and systems in place to carry out the contracts that they've entered into, that companies take responsibility for the entire customer experience, and companies take responsibility for their commitments and fix things if they go wrong. And again, If you do that, your customers will want to do business with you. And if you do that, the policymakers and the regulators will be happy with what you're doing. So that's it from me. You will, following Fidelma's introduction, see some very good examples of companies that have put these principles into practice as a framework for communication. And if you follow that framework, you will build trust, brand loyalty, and lifetime value for your company. Thank you.